How's it going, everybody? Welcome to BA Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing the masterpiece that is The Dark Knight Returns. Now, I really want to ramp up this channel here soon, primarily focusing on any work or writer who has had a big impact on my stories, on my characters, and on me as a creator. And of course, I want to also touch on indie comics and other pieces of film and literature that are, well, let's say, talked about a lot online, and there's a lot of hubbub around them. But I really, really want to start showcasing stuff that's really inspired me. And what's a better series other than The Dark Knight Returns? I mean, Frank Miller. There's a reason why it's considered a masterpiece, and it really is a masterclass in how to write a comic or just a compelling story in general. His art style, his way of utilizing dialogue as well as inner monologue, just really immerses you as a reader, and it really makes it an engaging story. And him and Alan Moore are definitely up in the top three for me for writers that have really inspired me. So let's kick it off. So let me share my screen here a little bit. So I don't really do fancy videos with a lot of editing. I don't really have time for that, unfortunately. So I like to do a little bit more of a just classic, reviewing of notes, and talk about parallels with other works, and also show some of the art and examples of the dialogue that are really worth talking about. So to start out, I really, really enjoyed the fact that there was a fantastic prose opener. It really warms up the reader and provides meaningful insight into who Batman was and who he is at that moment in time. And I really, really liked how they had this just kind of rustic style paper clipping or paper page, kind of from like a classic, paper, and it had it being written by James Olsen, which I think was really fitting. And the one section that really stuck with me, that really warmed me up as a reader and gave you a feel for what type of Batman story Miller was going to tell, is this section here, where it says, "But they never talk about the mean one, the cruel one, the one who couldn't fly or bend steel in his bare hands, the one who scared the crap out of everybody and laughed at all the rest of us for being the envious cowards we were. No, they never talked about him. Say his name and watch Dibney's face sag so bad his jaw hits the floor, or hits the bar. Not a man among them wants to hear about Batman." So that right there, it tells you this is going to be more of a gritty Batman who literally uses fear as his greatest weapon. So I knew exactly what I was getting into. Now, of course, I knew outside of reading that, but if you were a brand new reader that hadn't heard of the story, didn't know much about it, that would really warm them up to it. So I really appreciated that. And I really love how Alan Moore also incorporates prose pages in a lot of his comics and graphic novels, especially in Watchmen, right? He has sections of 2 to 4 pages of prose where he can really dig into the backstory of certain characters that really gives you additional information to help you understand more of the context behind the story. And me being a prose writer, of course I'm biased, but I really appreciate that they kind of mix that in with the visual storytelling aspect. So to start, the art and the designs. So Miller's art is unique. At first, it's almost a little off-putting and jarring, but as you start to read the story and the deeper you get into the pages, you really start to appreciate it. It's not really heavy in the detail department in terms of line art, but it always seems to capture the intensity of the scene as well as the emotions of the characters. I mean, essentially, it was rough at times and raw, just like Batman. So that really was fitting in a way for Batman. And one thing I noticed is all the bad characters, or let's say the evil folks in the media that were doing dialogue throughout the story, he made them look extremely ugly, right? Extremely annoying. They all had kind of like punchable faces, and I'm sure he did that on purpose. But I really appreciated that because you could really tell, not only with the dialogue but with how they look, that like, yeah, this is not a good person. He's really trying to drive that home, and so I thought, that's not a lot of artists and writers do a really good job at that. So he was showing and telling all at the same time. Um, I really appreciated his depictions through his art style for Gordon and Batman. I thought they were always spot on. Uh, Gordon just looked perfect the way he depicted him, the way he drew him, and he just had this wasn't just like old and like weathered, but he was very stoic, and it just really felt like traditional Gordon. And you could just tell that he was beaten down by what Gothic has done, or Gotham has done to him, but he's still hyper motivated to do the right thing, and you could just see in his facial expressions and with his dialogue that, again, he was weathered from what Batman or what Gotham had done to him over the years. And I think Miller did the same thing with depicting older Bruce, right? So Batman Unmasked did just a really good job of showing just how weathered he was in terms of just all the experiences and pain that he had went through, and yeah, just it was very fitting. So I really appreciated his art style when it came to drawing both of them. And then of course I love how he portrayed Batman, or Bruce Wayne, of course, suited up. Just his physicality, his muscular proportions, and how he brought kind of a fresh look to the suits and to the logo. And I think that led directly to the perfect casting and physical portrayal of Batman in Batman vs Superman and in Zack Snyder's Justice League. But I just really liked how big and bulky, but not over the top, that he had, Batman kind of stylized as. And right here is again a good example of just how he depicted Batman in the art style. I just really, really loved these entire page shots of Batman. Now going into the writing and the story, like Alan Moore, he provides again a masterclass in comic book writing with The Dark Knight Returns. His ability to blend art, external dialogue, internal monologue just really helped the story flow. Really helped you feel what Batman was feeling, understand what his motivations were, and how his past motivated his present day actions. And I just really, really loved his what could be, I kind of guess, deemed as excessive use of internal monologue, but just with every fight scene, every sensation, every pain, every thought was just laid out right in front for the reader, and so you felt like you were right in his shoes. And some comics and even novels, it feels very rushed to where there's not enough dialogue or inner monologue to kind of slow you down so that you're not jumping from panel to panel trying to basically just use the art to depict the scene. So that inner monologue to me just really helped you understand the character. You knew exactly when he felt, nauseous from the pain, dizzy when he was near blacking out, when he had maybe a witty thought, etc. I just really appreciated that you really got into the mind of Bruce Wayne, of Batman, and of some of the other characters, and helped pace the story for me and slow it down in a good way so that you could appreciate all the text and then appreciate the art at the same time, again, without having to kind of rush through the story because you're just trying to jump to the next text and there's not as much in some of the other stories. So really, really enjoyed that. And I loved how he used different colors for the bubbles so that you knew like you were in Batman's point of view. You knew exactly who he was using inner monologue for. His characters were, of course, three-dimensional. Like I said, you knew exactly what Batman's motivations were and what impacted said motivation. So it was really easy to follow, and it was really easy to just understand in general. And they did a really good job doing flashbacks so that, again, if it was a brand new reader that didn't know Batman for some reason or didn't know his backstory, they did a really good job of just showing his parents' death and all the experiences that led up to why he became Batman, but also why he got pulled back into the streets of Gotham to fight crime. And the other thing is he made it very clear why every character was in the story and what their purpose was. Like I said, with all the media personalities, it was very clear what their intentions were, what their purpose in the story was. And that's where I appreciate his use of realism, similar to Moore. And when I say realism, it's the sense that back then, when he wrote this in current day, right, media manipulation and brainwashing has always played a huge part in the general population, and that's exactly what those media personalities were doing, right? They were trying to convince the general population that Batman was evil, that he was crazy, that all the bad things that were happening, even the acts of criminals, were somehow the responsibility of Batman's. right? They're trying to turn the people against the heroes, and I do think that's exactly what would happen if we had real life vigilantes or real life superheroes. And so I really liked how he utilized that because that's exactly what the media does, right? That's what these outlets do constantly. They try to convince you which country is good, which presidential candidate is good, and most of the times they're way off. And so he did a really good job showcasing how manipulative the media was and journalists were. So absolutely love that. And Moore does a very similar thing in Watchmen, of course, too. The villains were nasty; they were irredeemable, and he did a very good job showcasing how nasty they were, not only through their actions and through the art, but through their dialogue as well. So I always appreciate someone that can write truly bad villains and keep them bad, and explain why they're bad, show what their motivations are. So I really appreciated that. And the one thing that was very clear in it as well is because of how nasty the villains are in this series and just in a lot of the Batman runs, it justified and it showed why Batman was willing to get his fists bloodied and break some bones and laws along the way to get the job done. And he also did a fantastic job just showing how difficult it was to be Batman, especially at the age that Bruce is in the story. Again, using the inner monologue, you could always tell when he was in pain, the extent of the pain, the different sensations he was experiencing. So they really showed him taking damage and the effect that it had on him and how difficult it was for him to overcome those injuries. And also just how Alfred played such an integral role in making sure that Batman survived, right, and could continue his job. So it did a really good job portraying that side of things. Nothing was ever really easy for him, but his effort was always at its height. He also did a good job just displaying Batman's gadgets, weapons, and his vehicles as well. And the plot, of course, was very layered and well thought out. It ran much deeper than just a good guy versus a bad guy, or good guys versus bad guys, especially with the introduction of Superman later in the story. I felt like the pacing was very smooth. Again, especially with that inner monologue, it didn't feel rushed, as if he was just trying to cram too much on each page. Um, really appreciated the heavy dialogue usage. Helped me focus more on the scene versus getting lost in the art, or again trying to rush on to the next panel to get more dialogue, to get more text, and it just made it more immersive and in depth for me. Also promoted me to examine the art more slowly to line it up with that inner monologue when he's explaining the pain or the sensations he's having. You can look at the art and again it lines up. He did a really good job of using facial expressions and just different movements of the body to express, like when he was actually in excruciating pain in his side or something of that nature. So it really lined up well. Again, I touched on the whole use of media personalities. I think that was just fantastic. So yeah, realism done right, in my opinion. And tying into again that use of realism, that's what I think Watchmen did well, and that's what I think the Snyder verse did really well. He really captured aspects of the story of Dark Knight Returns in Batman vs Superman, but with the added touch of Lex's power and influence, manipulating said media and politicians. So I think we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's a lot of parallels with Batman vs Superman in this story. I understand some folks may not like the depiction of Superman in those films, but his use of realism and his portrayal of Batman and the villains and the use of media manipulation, political manipulation of heroes and all that, I thought was really on point. So right here is just an example of some of the dialogue used with some of these media personalities. And of course, right, I mean, just look at some of these art portrayals, like you can really tell they look like just shitty people, which is spot on. And this is just funny with the fat lady eating a hot dog. That's great. But yeah, if you read each of those sections of dialogue, like it's just really intense, just vile, manipulation towards the general population. And I really appreciated the focus on his obsession to his creed, and the fact that Bruce clearly explained to the reader why he had to return, as well as the memory of his parents being killed, and mixing that in with the constant news coverage of the citywide depravity, which pushed him over the edge and just really forced him to jump back into action. So I thought that that was really powerful. It wasn't just this random, like, the hero steps away from the city and then for little to no reason jumps back in or is really hesitant to jump back in, and the motivation isn't really there. In this story, it's very, very clear why Bruce jumps back in and how he's just, like, mentally, he is just forced to return, and you understand why. And yeah, I wanted to cover some of the parallels to Batman vs Superman. So, like I said, I can understand some folks not liking, let's say, the more rough portrayal of Superman. Superman that's really struggling with human emotion and adapting to adult human life, right? Trying to find himself. Um, but I really think that folks that love The Dark Knight Returns should really appreciate Batman vs Superman, specifically the Ultimate Edition, because Snyder really pulled a lot of scenes and even dialogue straight from this series, and he did a really good job doing it, just like he did with Watchmen. So obviously, this shot here, very iconic there. I think he did a really good job tossing that into the movie. The way he had young Bruce falling into the cave. That was a really great opening scene there in Batman vs Superman. The murder of his parents, right? The iconic shot of the pearl necklace. Just such a powerful scene in here and also in that movie. And again, just the intensity of the facial expressions, and like, that was just such a cool idea to have. Right when he pulls the trigger, where all of the pearls just break off the necklace. Just such a cool scene there. And yeah, of course, like, the memory of that just drives him to have to jump back into action. Also, Alfred's portrayal in Batman vs Superman with Jeremy Irons was perfect. It was just like in this series. His witty demeanor. I mean, they literally pulled dialogue right from the book, which was awesome. Like this scene right here, where he's like, that will be all, or, Master Bruce. I'm hoping the next generation of the Wayne family shan't face a empty wine cellar. Though given your social schedule of late, the prospects of there being a next generation. Again, he was just, Jeremy Irons did such a good job, almost using that exact dialogue in the movie, just being witty, sarcastic, and it was just I really appreciated that depiction of Alfred in both the movie and in this comic. And then, of course, just like the pearl necklace shot, this "I believe you" shot in both Batman vs Superman and in The Dark Knight Returns was just so phenomenal. And I know people don't like the idea of Batman using a gun. Some don't, but I like how he put him in a situation that was near impossible, to where he would have to utilize a gun in order to save this kid, or in the movie, right, save Martha, Superman's mom. And the only thing that he really switched here, other than switching the kid, with the mom, was the order of which he said, "I believe you." In the comic, he says, "I believe you" after he shot him. In the movie, he said, "I believe you" right before. But either way, I just absolutely love this scene. And since there was a kid involved, and there's like a huge blood splatter in the shot, you know, where the bad guy gets actually shot, I do believe Miller's intention here was that Batman killed the guy, which I'm 100% okay with, right? This is a perfect example of where Batman would be 100% justified if he had to do a kill shot in order to stop that guy and save the kid, right? Because you don't want to risk shooting him in the shoulder and the guy's still popping off around in the kid, right? If you were to just take him out, 100% justified. I do think he's willing to bend that rule in certain situations when it comes to kids. And I really appreciated, again, just the way they did this scene in this comic, as well as in the movie. Just such a powerful scene. And the art here, just awesome. And I also loved how he had him busting through the wall, just like in Batman vs Superman and in the comics. So just fantastic parallels. I thought both creators did a fantastic job there. And one other thing, and I'm gonna have to do a video specifically reviewing Batman vs Superman, but anyone who couldn't believe that Batman and Superman fought in Batman vs Superman either didn't read this series or forgot about it, because they have quite the fight, obviously, and it's very easy to understand why they are fighting. And to me, especially with the Ultimate Edition, it's very obvious why Batman and Superman need to fight in Batman vs Superman. Um, Superman, to me, Miller did a good job showing how gullible and how much of a lapdog Superman could be, and how much of a threat Superman could be because of that. I know people like him being a Boy Scout, but in this, he was a Boy Scout to the point where he would just blindly believe whatever the president says, right? And the president tells him, hey, go stop Batman, and he just does it. So, of course, Batman's got to defend himself because he is dead set on stopping the criminals in Gotham. So why would he let Superman subdue him and then risk all these people being hurt or the city being overran? And it just shows you how Superman's priorities are off, right? Instead of going and helping Batman and stopping all the crime and stopping the mutants, he's trying to stop Batman. So he did a good job making Superman super annoying, in my opinion, in this, which put all the focus on Batman, right? It's a Batman story, trying to understand Batman's mentality and what he's going through, and the fact that he needed to subdue and trick Superman to be able to stand by his creed and defend Gotham was, I thought, fantastic. And again, where they switched things up in Batman vs Superman was the fact that Batman was so blinded by rage at that point, and he's a bit obviously younger, that he and Superman allowed the newspapers, right, just the media in general and politicians to blind them, to make them gullible, to pin themselves against one another. But having a master manipulator, being Lex Luthor, behind all of it, I thought was a nice touch. It would force them to have to fight one another, but then ultimately, right, join forces and create the Justice League. And so, yeah, I thought Snyder did a really good job pulling in a lot of Miller's work, and yeah, I thought he paid some really good respects to his work. Yeah, I just really loved how Miller highlighted Batman's view that Superman had sold out vigilantes to the government, and how he gave the government all of the power. And as we know, no one should want to give the government all the power, right? They use it, they abuse it, and in many cases, it's governments that are causing most of the problems in the world. And so I really liked how he highlighted kind of Superman's, how gullible he was, but Batman just stayed true to his word and to his beliefs, and wasn't willing to be brainwashed. And then in obviously Batman vs Superman, Snyder used Superman's weakness of caring too much about what people thought and what the government thought, but added that aspect of, again, Lex driving the narrative behind closed doors to convince him that Batman was actually doing things too harshly, when in reality, Batman's just trying to stop crime. He's trying to stop the worst of the worst, and he wasn't the one killing the folks in the prison, things of that nature. But Lex was able to convince Superman that it was Batman doing all those things, and vice versa. And this was just a really great page here, just showing the interaction between the president and Superman, and again, just kind of that manipulation that the president used to convince Superman to stop Batman. And this last panel here, where he just says, "Yes, sir," and the president replies, "Good boy," right? Like he's his little lapdog. Yeah, that was a great page there. And of course, yeah, the Batman suit designs, the musculature, the logo design were pretty much pulled straight from the book for Batman vs Superman, especially the armored suit, as well as the kryptonite weapon. Obviously, they switched out the arrow versus using a smoke shell in Batman vs Superman, but did a really good job utilizing that in the movie. But it was really cool that they incorporated an old Oliver Queen in the story, so that's fantastic. And they both used that same dialogue during the fight about dying in the gutter for no reason at all, right? A lesson that Batman had learned, and also Batman referencing Superman not being a man, right? Not being human. So overall, absolutely love this series. With me right now, actually writing the script to my full first comic issue. I wanted to go through and just really study this book, take my time, take a bunch of notes, because I want to learn from the best. And like I said, Frank Miller, Alan Moore, right up there for me for being the best comic book writers. But obviously, Moore also does prose as well. So just fantastic books, fantastic characters. Going to be doing probably Batman Year One review soon, as well as Killing Joke. All of both of those guys' main books. Just so enjoyable going through these books again, especially while you're creating your own. Just I don't know, you get so much more immersed in the story, and it really widens your perspective and makes you think in a different way when you're trying to think about your own story, and helps you adjust the way you're doing it. So, obviously, a quick reminder for everybody, I do have 2 novels and a mini comic on Indiegogo. Vigilantes Creed, Book 1 and Book 2. We have the first prose novel there. And then here's the duology, which is both books in one. Some fantastic Joe Ball artwork here. So 500 pages of thrilling prose about a gargoyle and a team of vigilantes fighting terror in Detroit. And there's also a mini comic, which shows you all the key information about each character while depicting key scenes. So it's a more immersive reading experience, so something unique and fresh. So please go to Indiegogo.com and check those out. There's going to be a link in the description. We just crossed 13,000, trying to get to 15,000 across Indiegogo and on my comic. So appreciate you guys' support so far, and I appreciate you watching this review. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'm sure I missed certain things about the book that I wanted to talk about, but there's just, you could talk for hours about this story and go into such detail, but just wanted to highlight certain areas and aspects of it. But overall, one of the best books out there. I absolutely love it. So anyone who hasn't read it should read it, even if they're not a big fan of a grittier, darker Batman. Just Miller's writing ability and style. You should learn from stuff that you like, stuff that you might not like story-wise, because it's about how that writer portrays the characters. It's how he's able to immerse the reader. So you need to learn from several writers, several mediums, several different styles. So highly recommend it. So thank you guys for watching. God bless.